This segment was kicked off actually because I was talking with my buddy Corey. We were playing Elden Ring Seamless Co-op together. Great. It's great. If you've never played Seamless Co-op in Elden Ring, highly recommend it. It's very good. Little janky at times, but for a free mod, you can't complain. Beggars literally cannot be choosers. But I mentioned to him, like, we're chatting as you do when you're playing a game. And I was like, what do you think about the Duskbloods? Are you excited? He was like, what? What game? It's like the Duskbloods, you know? It's like, what? I don't know what that is. What is that game? I was like, oh. So now I realize something. I think that there's a bit of a bubble, okay? I think people, maybe a bubble. Maybe it's that it's in its own bucket. I'm not sure. But it was really, really interesting to me. In that moment, I sent him the trailer and he's like, oh, yeah, maybe I've seen that. I don't know. But it's very interesting because the Duskbloods should be on paper like the next big thing, right? This is a game coming from FromSoftware, the kings of ARPGs, the kings of exploration games, like the guys behind Elden Ring and Night Rain. To be fair, Night Rain did very well this year. And this is a brand new game. And to be clear, Night Rain and Armored Core 6, those were not Hidetaka Miyazaki games, okay? He worked early on in Armored Core. He did some early work on Night Rain, I believe, but they were not games that he was game director on. It was other members of his team that were in charge of those games. And he was putting his effort into Elden Ring, Shadow of the Air Tree, and now this. And so this should be very exciting. Everybody should be talking about it, right? This should be like the central hub of excitement for 2026. And I feel like nobody talks about it. It just does not come up in any discourse at all. In some circles, perhaps. But what's fascinating about this is just, I mean, I can just rewind here. This was announced. This is genuinely hilarious. This was announced on April 2nd, okay? April 2nd, 2025, as part of the Switch 2 showcase, announced for release in 2026. People pointed that out because it's very funny that they I'm trying to find the comment. Yeah, here it is. Quay posted this. Y'all announced it on April 2nd, so we knew it wasn't a joke. What is not a joke? What did they have to be very clear about? This is a Switch 2 exclusive game, okay? It is exclusive to the brand new console, the Switch 2. It comes out 2026, and it is a multiplayer game that requires the Nintendo Online membership to play. There's probably an offline single player mode, just like in Elden Ring, you can play it offline. Probably. I don't know if that's been confirmed, but this is a game built around being a Switch 2 exclusive that requires the Nintendo Online subscription, which I believe is around $30 a year. And what's fascinating is that right now, there is not really a big community of FromSoft fans on the Switch platform, whether it's the Switch 1 or Switch 2. And that's because these games just have not historically released on those platforms, so the players have not gone there. They're mainly on console or on PC. And so people already on Switch are not that hyped for it because they just have no exposure to it. They're not that interested. In fact, I believe the Elden Ring port to the Switch was delayed indefinitely because it ran so horribly. I think it was at Tokyo Game Show. They had demos for it that were behind closed doors and they were not allowed to record it. And apparently it ran so poorly that they delayed it indefinitely because even IGN's reporter was like, it's like the Jiminy Glick bit. Can you tell me how the Switch 2 port of Elden Ring runs? Let me guess. That's literally what happened. Okay. The Nintendo fan base is not that interested in it because they are not like FromSoft fans because they've never had FromSoft games to really sink their teeth into. They've had ports of like the original Demon Souls or something, but like not a lot of exposure elsewhere, you know? But yeah, so the core audience on Nintendo consoles are not that excited for it because like they just have no exposure to it. They've got Demon Souls, but like they've not gotten the steady drip of FromSoft content, right? And then the FromSoft community, that's where this is most interesting because as some of you guys said, there is already Night Rain. And for a lot of FromSoft fans who are interested in the PvP stuff or PvE rather, they've got that covered with Night Rain, the PvE stuff. Maybe PvP is something that is more directly interesting to them, but they feel like they've got that covered. But what I thought was most interesting is the responses on the subreddit. Okay, FromSoft fans are diehard. Okay, everybody knows it. They can sometimes even be low-key toxic. Shocking, I know, but they love these games. They love From Software. They love Hidetaka Miyazaki desperately, and the sentiment is very clear, as you can see here. Gandir says Miyazaki is cooking and we're locked out of the kitchen, and it's a vibe I can identify with. I feel that. I feel that on a spiritual level. Okay, From Software, multiplayer game on Nintendo Network. I laughed. It's sad. What's sad is this is the game for me. I love PvP, but I'm never buying a Switch 2. I'm also pretty concerned how the multiplayer experience will be. I almost said Death Stranding. Dark Souls 1 PvP on the Switch looks unplayable from what I've seen. Such a shame, as I'm the target audience for this game, but like other PvP players, we don't play on Switch. I don't know how they didn't realize this. I was totally not going to buy a Switch 2, and now I just watched the videos on Zelda games running on it, and Donkey Kong Bonanza is getting tense. Makes me fight the urge knowing it's going to be hard for me not to when Duskbloods come out. I really dislike Dark Souls PvP, and it being on Nintendo's network with the problems already present with laggy netcode really makes me both happy it's on Switch, but sad its aesthetic is trapped there. We still have Bloodborne, and even with 30 FPS, I'll take it over Souls PvP by way of Nintendo. There's a broad sentiment of people who are just like, I'm good. No Switch for me. As much as I love Night Rain, what makes it successful does not necessarily apply to Duskbloods, such as large player base due to no exclusivity. Elden Ring, established name, garner more attention and easier to get into because of similar mechanics. Unfortunately, what hindered Night Rain will also hinder Duskbloods. We have to agree that Night Rain server was not the best. Now imagine that on a PvPvE game with Switch connectivity. I'm definitely not going to buy another console just to play one game. And I think that this is another piece of it too. FromSoft players, like, these are their games. This is the games they play. I could be wrong. My suspicion is that people who are really into Elden Ring, Night Rain, Sekiro, like, they're really into FromSoft games. They're probably not the kind of players who are going to eat up Donkey Kong Bonanza. You know, they're probably not the kinds of players who are going to buy a Switch 2 for this one game and then fill out their library full of Mario Karts and Mario Parties. You know, I don't know if there's a lot of crossover there. They could build out duplicates of the rest of their library. Maybe they like games like Silksong. You know, they want to get really tough Metroid games, like whatever it may be. I think that they would find games that they could dig into, but I think there's a large chunk of players who would view it as they are buying the console basically for this one game. Now, there's a lot of questions around it, and the people who are familiar with it, you know, the sentiment is. I find this video very funny. This was posted April 9th, a week after it was revealed, by IGN. And it is a video titled The Duskbloods. Yes, it's multiplayer, but have some faith in Miyazaki. From the outset, it's, yes, it's multiplayer. But have some confidence. Have some faith. Some goddamn faith in Hidetaka Miyazaki. And he does know what he's doing. He does know what he's doing. But, like, if we look at this, is this a game that you, if you're not on Switch 2, you're willing to spend this kind of money on? Like, because again, you're talking about a $500+ console. You probably are going to need a Pro controller because this is one of those games where you probably don't want to play on like little Joy-Cons. And a $30 Nintendo Online subscription.
Donated $10 through Super Chat. FromSoft games should never be exclusive to a certain platform. Cancel me.
Cancel me, I don't care. Cancel me. Well, what's funny is that the sentiment has been this, literally. The Duskbloods is making me feel like those who didn't have a PlayStation when Bloodborne came out. I'm thirsty for new From Software IP, and given the fact that their next game is a Switch 2 exclusive for God knows how much, which is another piece of this, because Nintendo already established that they're willing to charge $80 for the biggest exclusives like Mario Kart. You think this one won't also be 80? I think this is going to be 80. I'd be shocked if it's not. I think it's $80, 1,000%. Exactly. I totally agree. He said, it's making me feel like 2015 fans who didn't have a PlayStation when Bloodborne came out. Now I know the pain. The fact that this game is a Bloodborne, not so Bloodborne is ironic. History repeats itself, but this time at least it's their own IP and it's multiplayer. But like if we're looking at this, is this the kind of game that you'd be willing to spend $500, $580 with the game?
At Walter King
$680
Run
with the Pro
donated
controller,
€10 through Super Chat.
almost $700.
I love Night Train. I have around 450 hours, and not only do I not want to support Nintendo after the whole Palworld thing, but also PvPvE game on a Nintendo console sounds miserable.
Yeah, for those not familiar, thank you for the 10. For those not familiar, Nintendo's network infrastructure is notorious for being, what's the term? Trash, garbage, bad. It's not great. Shocking, I know. You don't actually need to invest that much in your infrastructure for network, like servers and stuff, when people are mainly using it for like kids party games and stuff. You just don't need it. So when people heard that this game, which is all about like timing and positioning and like precise parrying, that's going to be reliant on those servers, people not that confident. But like, listen to the description of what the game is. Is this a game you're willing to spend $700 to play, even if you're a hardcore FromSoft fan?
Like a lot of Bloodborne fans, I completely lost my when the Duskbloods was first revealed in the most recent Nintendo Direct. From the first frames of a gaunt, puffy-shirted invalid slumped in a mahogany chair under the light.
Hey, invalid's a little strong. Let's not get too judgy. You know, I've laid like that. Does that make me an, oh God.
The full moon, to the gothic skylines of Yarnum-esque spires and steeples, to a clerically bestial boss with mangy lupine features and one huge arm, the Duskbloods wears its Bloodborne influences on its sleeve like a vampiric sigil carved into pale Victorian flesh. After a decade of fan outcry, FromSoft is finally giving fans what looks to be a spiritual successor to the beloved 2015 PS4 exclusive, widely lauded as one of the best games ever made. But unfortunately for some, the operative word here is looks. After finding out what the Duskbloods actually is, my excitement began to diminish faster than my health bar in a poison swamp. Unlike Bloodborne, an action RPG, the Duskbloods is clearly labeled as a multiplayer action game. The official messaging on FromSoftware's Japanese site describes it as a PvPvE title with online multiplayer at its core, in which up to 8 players will fight among themselves and against challenging foes. Looking at the various reactions around the internet, it's clear that I'm not the only FromSoft fan who was disappointed by this news.
It just isn't fair.
But I thought about this, and I realized something. As much as I'm not interested in a multiplayer action game that kinda looks like Bloodborne, the Duskbloods is still something worth getting excited about. It's a completely new project, directed by Hidetaka Miyazaki. His track record speaks for itself, and he's the whole reason that we have the Soulsborne genre in the first place, because he was willing to try something new. So even though I'm skeptical,
It is true. And this is what I've said before, is that skepticism is not just being a cynical asshole. Okay? There's, believe it or not, there's more to it. That's only a small part of it. But reputation does matter. Reputation, track record does matter. When you're looking at Rockstar, people are like, oh, well, I'm skeptical, so I'm not going to be excited for GTA 6. Like, no, I think you can be excited for GTA 6 because their track record is crazy. It's insane. Same with Hidetaka Miyazaki. So far, doesn't really miss. Just doesn't.
At Luke Smith 9723 donated $9.99 through Super Chat.
Thank you, my friend.
I understand why people justifiably hate Nintendo and their games and their prices. I simply enjoy my Switch 2 anyway. Cancel me.
Cancel me. I don't care. Cancel me. Yeah, well, the games kind of speak for themselves at the end of the day. And if you like the games and the games are worth the price point for you, killer. I mean, I'm glad, you know, that you're connecting with those. But yeah, Nintendo's one of those companies that everybody agrees kind of sucks, but everybody's like, yeah, well, but they have Mario Kart. You know, it's like, I hate it. Anyway, here's my money. You know, that's just how they work. It's how it is. It's how it is. Thank you for the 10, by the way. So reputation does matter. Hidetaka Miyazaki, fantastic track record, clearly a brilliant game designer. And he's also, and this is what I personally love most about him, is that he's humble at his core. He's not doing a lot of press. He's not doing a lot of interviews where people just like blow hot air up his whatever. He's just a humble, grounded guy who loves video games and is trying to build the best ones he can. And because he's humble, he also is not interested in just like chasing down the easy money. If they wanted to just instantly, like if he wanted to go and instantly have enough money to go buy a yacht, he could just go and make Elden Ring 2, shop that to Capcom or whatever, and ride that to the bank. I mean, he could easily do that and make stupid money, but he doesn't do that. He wants to do something fresh, something different, something weird, something even a lot of his own fans are like, really? And I respect that. I respect that a lot. Does it mean that I'm instantaneously going to just throw my money at him? No. You still have to convince me with the product, but I appreciate that he's not like so many of the other people in the industry where it seems like the second they see the chance to get the fat check, they bail on like everything that made them what they were. Whether it's, you look at Bungie and all of their executive team, the second they get the fat check offered to them, they just give up basically. Or Todd, where the second he gets a taste of that paid mod money, all of a sudden all the design philosophies that made those older games so great go out the window so that they can milk that dry. I respect it a lot. I really respect it a lot. But just because I respect the reputation, I respect the vibe, the design philosophy, that does not mean that you just blindly throw your money at them when they do something new. They still have to convince you it's a product worth buying. But I do think you should keep in the back of your head the reputation and the respect you have for them, because it is something worth noting and it is something to appreciate when you're considering Duskbloods, is that you're not talking about a Night Rain project. You're not talking about Armored Core 6, which was put together by another one of his producers. You're talking about the man, the guy. You are not him. Miyazaki's him. He's the guy, and he's the one directing this.
I think it's worth giving him the benefit of the doubt, and I'll tell you why. In a Creator's Voice blog post on the official Nintendo site, Miyazaki went into more detail. There are over a dozen characters for the player to choose from, each with their own identity and appearance, he explained. The game has a so-called hub area where players can choose their character, customize them, and enter online multiplayer. Upon concluding an online match, players then return to the hub, at which point they receive some sort of reward, whether they win or lose. Using these rewards, players can further customize their character, and so the cycle continues. If that was all we had to go on, I would write this game off entirely because it sounds like yet another hero shooter shaped cash grab. Lots of people love multiplayer games. That's why they keep making them, which is great, except when publishers bank everything on live service projects thinking they've got the next Fortnite or Call of Duty on their hands, and then pull the plug, take the game offline, and lay everyone off after they discover the target demographic is still just playing Fortnite or Call of Duty. Thankfully, the Duskbloods doesn't sound like it's just checking boxes, but rather thinking outside of them. In the same blog post,
I also think it's interesting. Somebody said on stream the other day, they were like, I think that Duskbloods and Night Rain, they're not meant to like, because it was prompted because I was like, I wonder if Night Rain is going to be cannibalized by the Duskbloods. Like when Duskbloods comes out, are a lot of those players just going to move over to Duskbloods? And I think some of them obviously will, but they were like, no. I think Night Rain is supposed to be the sort of, it's supposed to be the offering for people that don't want to convert to the Switch 2, because they knew a lot of people would not. So if they're interested in like the PvE gameplay, if they're interested in the online stuff, they have a product for them. And it also was like a testing ground where they could dip their toes in the water with networking a game like that is exclusively built around multiplayer. So it's sort of a multifaceted project for them. But it's more about giving players who don't want to convert over to the new console something that they can still play. And I thought that was interesting because I think there's certainly going to be a lot of them that don't convert over. For sure.
Miyazaki elaborated on what makes the Duskbloods unique, stating that online matches are generally last player standing, but there are certain cases where victory conditions differ, like a powerful boss enemy suddenly appearing, forcing everyone to put their differences aside to kill it. Furthermore, players will have their own roles, which are personal goals separate from the overall victory conditions. For instance, if one player has the destined rival role applied, they are tasked with finding and defeating one specific player. Conversely, there's also a destined companion role in which one player must seek out another player and form a bond with them. So everyone's trying to kill each other except for two people who are trying to be friends? I don't know, sounds kinda interesting. It remains to be seen how this actually functions in-game, but I'm intrigued. It sounds a little bit like the game Werewolf, in which players have varying objectives, but no one's quite sure what everyone else is doing. Miyazaki notes, quote, I personally am not much of a PvP person, and I wanted to make something that's satisfying even for players like me. And this right here is music to my ears because I am the same way. A lot of people play Fortnite for the straightforward competition, but I always had a good time just scampering around the map trying to do the secondary objectives while avoiding getting murdered by roving bands of 10-year-olds. It sounds kind of like there'll be various ways to score victory points in the Duskbloods aside from just killing everyone else, and Miyazaki notes that some players may prefer to earn points by avoiding direct combat and instead engaging in more opportunistic behavior. How you earn points is entirely up to you. Interesting. FromSoft's action RPGs are primarily...
I mean, like, that is all interesting. I also am more optimistic about, like, Night Rain, for me, I just do not click with games that require you to do the same maps and the same bosses over and over and over again. You know, there's some of those games where it's like, oh, well, this time it's different, though, because the boss has more health and now is green. And like, that just doesn't work for me. My brain just does not like that. But I'm more confident in Duskbloods over Night Rain achieving that because, like, just remember the sheer volume of content in Elden Ring. Like, that's the team that's working on this. So I have to feel, like, I have to suspect that they're going to have just a ridiculous number of variations of different bosses, of different ways that the game round can play out to keep it fresh. And if that's what they're able to offer, then I'm much more intrigued and interested. Because if it's just like, well, there's like 5 maps or five bosses that rotate, and then there's like, you know, different conditions where like sometimes it's raining and sometimes it's sunny, like that's not going to do it for me. But if it's a sheer volume of content on the level of like an Elden Ring, then I'm very interested.
Single player experiences, but dating back to Demon's Souls, they've all had a multiplayer component. Not counting Sekiro, but that's also not an RPG. Interacting with other players has largely been optional, buried in comically obtuse matchmaking systems that involve ringing dainty little bells and performing ambiguous rituals with someone else's amputated fingers or enchanted jewelry. One of FromSoft's best qualities is how their games let players figure, or finger, things out for themselves, and while it's immensely rewarding in terms of lore and exploration, it can get a little tedious when you're just trying to connect with other players. Summoning another player online to help beat a boss may have a stigma among some hardcore players, but it's there for a reason, and helping other players online has always been at the core of FromSoft's action RPGs. In a 2010 interview with Eurogamer, Miyazaki explained the origins of the anonymous co-op in Demon's Souls. His inspiration was the time his car got stuck in the snow at the bottom of a hill, but got over it after the cars behind him gave his car a push, even though he hadn't directly asked them to help. As he poetically described it, you could probably call it a connection of mutual assistance between transient people. Driving home, Miyazaki wondered how...
Yeah, that's what I would have called it.
How he would have gotten along with these anonymous Good Samaritans if they'd met under different circumstances. Would they be friends, or would they fight? The Duskbloods sounds almost like the inverse of this, like if there was an 8-car pileup and everyone got out of their cars to argue, but then 2 of the people realized they went to high school together and were old friends, but then a grizzly bear showed up and everybody put their differences aside to try and scare it off. Bear in mind, no pun intended.
This also, though, hold on, honest question. Have they announced if the Duskbloods will have prox chat? I don't even know if you can do that on Nintendo's network. I don't think so. I mean, I don't know, man. That seems important for a game like this, especially when you're interacting with players. So he also, this is interesting, I found, by trying to find this, I also found a tidbit where he, like from this interview, is talking about what led them to putting it on the Switch 2, and they say, please, first off, tell us what led this being developed for the Switch 2. A while back, we had the opportunity to meet with Nintendo and discuss ideas, and during this discussion, we presented a rough outline for the Duskbloods. It was still very bare bones at the time, more a loose string of ideas than a proper presentation. The concept itself was different from anything we had ever done before, and Nintendo seemed very interested in helping make it a reality. So that's when the project kicked off. At first, it was being worked on by a small team as a title for Nintendo Switch. However, just as the game started to take shape, we were approached by Nintendo with talk of Switch 2, which led to a revamp of our development path with this new hardware in mind. The new hardware focus on online features allowed us to stay true to the original vision as possible, which was also very good news for us. So they met with Nintendo and then presented it. Interesting. Anyway, continuing. Prox Chat. The reason I look at Prox Chat is because, like, if this is a game where you're trying to come up to players, and there's instances where, like, you have to befriend a player and then you have to, like, interact with players while fighting a boss, it seems like Prox Chat is such an obvious thing to have, but maybe they just don't have that on the Switch too. The Switch obviously is much more of a family console, so they, I'm sure, are much more sensitive to the idea of toxicity than PC players would be. But that still seems like a really obvious thing that you kind of need. Because I swear to God, if it's like, okay, befriend this player with like very weird emotes and then use this finger and then eat it, and then you take this reindeer hoof and you have to start a fire with it, like I can already see the headaches.
This is rampant speculation about a video game coming out in 2026 based on statements Miyazaki made 15 years ago, so take it with a pinch of spirit ashes, if you will. PvP is a contentious topic among Soulsborne players, and one criticism regularly leveled against it is that it's not properly balanced. And yeah, no sh**. FromSoft gives players an immense amount of freedom to craft different builds. For instance, Elden Ring has 414 weapons and 714 pieces of armor, all of which can be upgraded and modified, and all of which scale depending on how you've assigned skill points to one of 10 starting classes across 8 different stats, and that's not even factoring in talismans, runes, items, or whatever else I'm forgetting. If you can do the math to min-max a lightning perfume bottle profit build, you can probably run the numbers on how much time and money it would take to fine-tune Elden Ring's PvP enough to make everyone happy. The Duskbloods will have some degree of character customization, but that's the customization of a handful of pre-made characters. The fact that the game is described as action and not action RPG suggests to me that figuring out what your character can do will be a lot more streamlining than futzing around with granular upgrades in a big spreadsheet. It's worth pointing out that Elden Ring Night Rain's player progression has been streamlined in a similar fashion, with stat points being automatically allocated. It might be constricting for some fans of build crafting, but it means that players can get into the action faster, and FromSoft has less variables to account for in order to create a balanced experience. It's hard to talk about the Duskbloods without talking about Elden Ring Night Rain, and that's tricky since Night Rain hasn't actually come out yet. Still, a lot of people have formed opinions based on a recent network test, and what's been shown is likely indicative of Night Rain's basic gameplay loop, but it's not fair to assume that the Duskbloods will follow suit just because it's a multiplayer game. In fact, the messaging kinda got buried, but Night Rain isn't entirely a multiplayer game by default. The network test was just there to test that aspect of it, but supposedly Night Rain can be played solo, which I imagine will sit a lot better with a lot of folks. After all, even when you summon other players for co-op in Elden Ring, a lot of them insist on playing solo. The fact that Night Rain is connected to Elden Ring and not an entirely new property is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, Elden Ring sold almost 30 million copies, so you can't really fault Bandai Namco for wanting to cash in a bit on name brand recognition. At the same time, familiarity breeds contempt, and while there's definitely some new stuff showing up in Night Rain, there are also a lot of recycled elements and systems. That means less of a lift for the devs and less of a learning curve for returning players, but it also doesn't have that same new car smell or sense of mystery. Seeing a post-launch roguelike remix of a popular game as DLC is pretty common these days. God of War Ragnarok, The Last of Us Part 2, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Far Cry 6, Hitman World of Assassination, and even Splatoon 3 have all gotten modes that chop up their mechanics and systems and enemies into a randomized roguelike format. It's sort of like taking a bunch of Thanksgiving leftovers and making a casserole once you've exhausted all the conventional meal configurations involving turkey, stuffing, and mashed potatoes.
Dude, I love stuffing so much. I gotta stop streaming when I'm hungry. I love stuffing so much.
I don't mean that as a slight against roguelikes or casseroles, it's a creative reuse of stuff you got lying around.
Let us eat.
To circle back to my original point, giving the Duskbloods a chance because Miyazaki's in charge, it's worth noting that he's not in charge of Night Rain. That's being directed by Junya Ishizaki, a FromSoft veteran who's been around since the original Dark Souls and acted as battle director for Elden Ring, which is not only an objectively awesome job description, but one that he obviously performed with flying colors. The last time Miyazaki let someone else take the wheel of one of his properties, we got the infamously divisive Dark Souls 2. I don't bring this up to throw shade at Night Rain or Mr. Ishizaki, but rather to point out that the reason Miyazaki stepped away was to establish a whole new universe, which was Bloodborne. And now, he's stepping away from Elden Ring to work on the Duskbloods.
I give you my blood.
Narrative tends to get backburnered in multiplayer games.
I mean, again, it's just as we go through all of this, it's still mysterious. We don't know details. It could change. But it's not just about me. Like I'm a weird guy. I talk about video games all day. I love this. It's my bread and butter, but it's not like who needs to engage with Duskbloods for it to pop off, and like what are they aiming for? I think the fact that Night Rain exists to give fans that are currently established on PC or console, traditional consoles, it gives them something to play. I think that signals that their main goal is to build out a new audience from Nintendo players. There will be some people that convert, that come over, buy a Switch 2, and have played all these other games on other platforms. But I think their real hope is to try and find a new audience as well, of new players who have never been exposed to these types of games before. And I do think that they will find some people, especially they're also porting over Elden Ring at the same time. And so they hope to at least capture some new fans. But I just think like the game sounds interesting. I'm excited to see it and check it out. The fact Miyazaki's working on it is cool. But again, it's just it's crazy, because how good is good enough to justify $700? You know, like how good does this have to be worth $700? Because like we said, it's like a $550 console depending on where you live. The game almost certainly is going to be $80 on top of that. So we say 600, just average it out. We'll say 600. You probably also want a pro controller for a game like this. You're not going to be playing this on like the little Joy-Cons. Though not necessary, but still. That's like $80 to $100. I'm not sure how much. And we're already at like $700, not to mention the online membership that's going to be $30 on top of that. Like, how good does this game have to be for you to spend that kind of money? Especially people jokingly say in this economy, but like seriously, in this economy, you know? And it just, again, it brings me back to this comment. Miyazaki's cooking, but we're locked out of the kitchen. And I think a lot of people, it's not just a matter of like, do they love it enough to spend $700? A lot of people just straight up don't have $700. Nobody does this math for exclusive games. Do you mean nobody is doing the math? They're just going to buy it on vibes? What do you mean? Astrobot is not worth 80 or 800 for PS5 Pro and Pro Controller in the game. The point specifically with this is that the people who are, you can see it in the subreddits where these communities have gathered. These are players who are not interested in the Nintendo lineup of games. They're not interested in Mario Kart. They're not interested in Donkey Kong Bonanza. They're not interested in those games. They would be buying this for the Duskbloods and maybe to play Elden Ring on the go, you know, when that port eventually drops, assuming it runs. And so for them, it is a different equation than it would be to like buy a PC to play Baldur's Gate, you know, where you also then get access to the entire Steam library of everything, every freaking game. So I think it's just a different equation. But let's see. You could get like 70 Tiger Electronics for that kind of money. You could. Some of us do, but it's almost all of our savings. Well, and I mean, the game, I think this is why it's just so fascinating to me. This whole thing is going to be fascinating because I think that the game looks good. And I think, you know, Hidetaka knows what he's doing when it comes to making games. But this was such a bizarre tactical choice to not just do like a Bloodborne spiritual successor, at least in vibes, and make it exclusive, but it's a multiplayer game that is also going to be dependent on Nintendo's network infrastructure, which is notoriously terrible. It also is a game that really seems to beg for proximity chat, which I don't think is something Nintendo is ever going to allow. So it's just across the board. It's just confusing. It's confusing. And pretty clearly, it's a game that's being built up to try and build out the more mature side of Nintendo's audience, which they don't historically have a very mature customer base. And so they're trying to do that. And they're also trying to build out more network infrastructure, because that's recurrent revenue. If they can get you spending $30 a year, maybe they can up that to $50 a year. And then that's something that they're getting every single year out of you, even on years when they don't have a new Zelda game to release. You know, they really want that recurrent revenue, which is why all the other big players are chasing it too. And it's why I would not be surprised if right before this drops, it's announced that there's a price hike and it goes from $30 a year to $50 a year or $60 a year. And, you know, they justify it as, well, we're overhauling the network infrastructure in preparation for the Duskbloods, so we need that money. But like straight up, if there's Nintendo server problems on launch day, you just won't be able to play the game. Like, and a lot of people, they don't have that much confidence that they're gonna be able to avoid that, you know? So for me, like, yeah, sure, I'll buy the game, check it out, whatever. But it's not about me, as much as it pains me to say that. It's about the average consumer, the average gamer, that was really into FromSoft games and loved Elden Ring. Does this appeal to them? Does this hook them? Or maybe it just doesn't. And it comes and goes, and it's fine, you know, it performs even pretty well, but most people just sit on the sidelines waiting for Elden Ring 2. I don't know, but it's just crazy to see that after the ridiculous success of Elden Ring, that this is the route they go, because every other studio, I feel, would just chase down Elden Ring 2. But instead they're doing this game, which just across the board, I just find very confusing. You know, it's just confusing. So I'm excited to see how it goes. I really am. Are we getting a new FromSoft game this upcoming award show? Maybe a trailer for this. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we got a new Duskbloods trailer at the Game Awards. It would not shock me at all. It kind of makes perfect sense, honestly. They've won Game of the Year. They could call Jeff up and do a trailer for it. I'm sure Nintendo would love to have a trailer as like the big final gavel hit at the end of the Game Awards. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. So I don't know. It's going to be really cool to see how they approach it. I'm excited to see more about the game, but more than anything, I am just intrigued and curious as to how this does. Does it win over players? Does it get people to convert and buy a Switch 2 for this game? I mean, who knows? Maybe when they buy the game, you know, they buy it and they move over and they're like, ooh, I love Mario Kart. I liked Elden Ring, but I love Mario Kart. Maybe that's what it's going to be. Who knows? But it's going to be really interesting to see how it goes, because I think, again, Duskbloods has sort of flown under the radar for a lot of FromSoft fans because they were not watching a Nintendo Treehouse event. Like, and if they were not on Twitter that day, they might have missed it, as my friend did, you know? And so I do wonder how this is going to play out, and if the FromSoft community like embraces it and it becomes the next big thing, or if it just kind of sputters away and goes away, you know? Are you gonna try Duskbloods? Yeah, I mean, it's literally my job to try and play like pretty much everything. But like I said, it's not about me. I'm a very rare breed in the sense that like I have all of this to do for a living. Like this is what I do. Most people do not do that. Like they have only so much time and money to spend on the hobby, and they've got to be very precise with what they do and how. So anyway, it's going to be interesting. I'm excited. FromSoftware extraction shooter when? Dude, is this not kind of an extraction shooter? I mean, my understanding is it's a PvPvE game where you load into a match and you play with other players, you gather stuff, and then there's only like one winner. I mean, it's kind of an extraction shooter. Like it kind of low-key is already. So I guess we're already there. He took my thing. Red flag.